Tonight we've got Rio is our special guest, and so he is doing a lot with AI generated artwork and is recently getting into NFTs and
like cryptocurrency and all that.
Knows a lot about it in a short amount of time. So he's going to try to teach us all. I'm the first to admit that I feel old whenever everyone talks about all this new stuff, but I think everyone in college age feels like they don't understand it too much either. So now we're going into high school. So Rio.
I think at some point we're going to start referring to elementary kids to teach us everything, you know?
So Rio's here to help us understand it, and Ethan is going to help moderate. So yeah, if there's at any time, like Rio knows a lot of this new terminology and stuff. So if at any time you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, that's how I felt a week ago. So please say in the chat and Ethan can grab it and let Rio know, or just like raise your hand, unmute, whatever you want to do. So Rio, please take it away. Introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Rio Harper. I'm a student at Kaz High School, and I do a lot of stuff with AI and have been, you know, venturing into the dark basement that is cryptocurrency and NFTs, and doing my own collections intersecting AI and creative aspects of human interaction.
Awesome. All right, everyone. So today we're going to talk about NFTs. Now, I don't know. I'm guessing if you're logging into this, you don't know too much about what those are. I don't really either, honestly. But I do know a fair amount about technology, and I'm going to try and guide us on this crazy path. I used to be a student of Shayna's, and I know a lot about the media and technology world. Here's my degree, so I can prove to you all that I did go to college. So that's something. And then also, here's my Coinbase wallet to show you that I own Bitcoin. Not a lot, but I own, as of right now, $379. That was once.
That might be worth either. That might be worth either $5 tomorrow or $1,000. Who knows? It's a real
exactly, because this is kind of a crazy thing. So we're talking about NFTs. If you read into this a little bit, you know that means non-fungible token. What does that mean? Well, it means that it's not a fungible token. So these are all big and complicated and strange terms, but it's really not that complicated. The overview, on like an overview of what this is, and then, you know, Rio will get into the more specifics of this, is that, you know, you have Chuck E. Cheese token. You know, you go to Chuck E. Cheese, you put $1 in the machine. Each one of those tokens is, you know, they can be interchanged with each other. They're all the same thing. The individual one doesn't matter. They just represent more of a certain value. So that would be a fungible token, but these are not that. So each one is important. Each one is specific, sort of like a piece of art, for example, which we're going to get into. So the Mona Lisa, there's only one of those. You could make another one. It could look exactly the same, but it's not the one item. So how that kind of relates to Bitcoin and the blockchain, and a little bit more on that, I'll hand it over to Rio, and he can start to bring us in and catch us up to speed.
Absolutely. So NFTs, as he explained, you know, they're unique. Like, think of them. I mean, it depends on how old you are, but either like Pokemon cards or like baseball cards. So it's like a digital version of that in a lot of ways. A piece of, I mean, a lot of people, you know, say like PNGs, like, oh, you can just copy and paste the NFT, you're done. But like in reality, it's more of a social construct. So PNGs, like you can save them, and then that can be, you can show digitally that you own that, and like in the history of where that image has been. which is a really interesting technology in my opinion that really has not been looked into enough as a technology for other use cases other than like selling art, for instance. And so the art is
Well, why don't we take it a step back and let's talk a little bit about like what the actual maybe overview of technology is, and like what, like this is like an abstract concept to begin with. So like,
yeah.
what is the thing? Like, what are you interacting with? What is the interface that you have with an NFT?
Yeah, so the interface is that you hold a token, so it's a string of letters and numbers that correspond to the image, and that is in a blockchain, which is like a system. I think they'll get into this, but yeah, blockchain, backs it all up. It's like it's like a Federal Reserve almost, but like it controls everything, and it holds all the NFTs that are in that blockchain. And so you can trade them with other people, or you can hold them and show that you're the owner of that NFT, or for instance, you're the owner of this baseball card because it has the serial number on it. So it's in a similar vein to that. And it's not similar. Binary code is just ones and zeros, and so this is more of like a serial number. If you've ever seen that on like a digital like a product that you might buy on Amazon, it sometimes will have a serial number. It's similar in that, so they're all unique. So you own a specific serial number that's attached to an image or a digital product.
Yeah, so blockchain is probably something that you guys might be familiar with. This is sort of the backbone of how these new cryptocurrencies are working. Getting into the specifics of how that exactly works is kind of difficult. But Rio, what are some of the benefits of using a blockchain over, say, the normal way that we do things? Like, why is this a technology that's important?
So as our world becomes more and more digital, especially during the age of, like where everyone is in isolation over the past year and a half or so, it is becoming increasingly important to show that you own something. It is like, so you can track who owns what, which can be a useful thing. And I think the technology is emerging. It's only become popular. I think April was like when it started to become even just somewhat recognizable. Like I think that's when I first started seeing it in like mainstream media. And so as I think Twitter is starting to utilize the technology to show that you own this image, and it's being used to like benefit digital creators, which is really helpful because artists always have a really tough time getting money to live, and so this is another revenue to do so. So there's a few different avenues, being able to show who owns what in a digital realm, and being able to support individuals through a decentralized space.
I have a quick question, if that's okay, or do we not want to take questions yet?
No, go ahead.
I'm just curious if like the idea of if this is kind of like a new neo version of like, freaking like how it used to be in the Renaissance, where there were like these people, private aristocrats funding artists. Like, is this at odds with like public funding of the arts, would you say? Or is this something that can just like help kind of like supplement the income of artists? Because like it seems really cool. It's just the only downside seems like if like this is the only way artists can make money, then they end up going through this similar kind of problem eventually, where like you need like these like very wealthy people to fund you. So I wonder if you think this can be kind of something that exists in parallel with like funding of the arts that goes beyond kind of these private wealthy like funders, or do you think this is kind of just a new way for wealthy people to buy art, which is just digital and not in a gallery?
Absolutely. So I think there is a double-sided sword to that. I think that there is obviously going to be places where money laundering is going to happen. I think there was a recent situation where an NFT got sold for $500 million, but it was transferred back to the original like wallet, like the owner, and so it was very fishy. So I think there's obviously going to be places where that's going to happen, and that's really unfortunate. However, I think it's also a lot of NFTs are just created by people who are like individuals who are, own a few $100s in cryptocurrency and bought an NFT that hoping that it will go up in value, right? And so in large part, it's more of an individual basis rather than like a rich dude funding everything. And I think it'll probably be in parallel to like public arts because obviously it's in digital realm. So a lot of there's still obviously going to be always a need of physical art, and I think that will definitely stay in the traditional sense, being funded by government and private, private ventures and all that jazz.
And
That's
Rio, maybe let's just maybe take one step back for a second and talk about how artists can make money from these NFTs. So we've talked a little bit about what they are. They're this technology using the blockchain. But how does that enable artists to be able to kind of make money and take control of their industry a little bit more?
So because you don't have to depend on like, let's talk about like, for instance, music. A lot of musical artists really hate record labels because they take a lot of your money. They can be very manipulative. They can force you to release stuff that you don't feel like is ready yet. And with cryptocurrency and NFTs, you can put forth a way to be like, it's like in very similar to YouTube in 2005, where you could upload your own things. You didn't have to worry about going through CNBC or the other kind of large corporate networks. And so it's very similar to that, but in a more image and art and all that kind of stuff in that kind of vein.
Yeah. So the theory is sort of, you have a digital file. Now you can copy that infinitely. So a lot of these artists are constrained to these distribution channels that exist, kind of like we were saying, like the sort of larger structure of media, like, you have to be on Spotify, you have to be with a record label, you have to be on TV, or you have to be on these sort of things. With the blockchain technology and with NFTs, we can prevent people from copying endlessly artwork, and that can kind of give creators a little bit more control over their industry. Is that right to say?
Yeah, I think that's a much more sophisticated way of putting it. But like, yeah, it's a decentralized way to be able to control what you produce when you want to and how you want to.
And maybe let's talk a little bit about some of what's going on in the chat is talking about, like, I think a lot of people may see their first exposure to NFTs, maybe people kind of joking on them a little bit, or kind of saying that there's, some, oh, I can just screenshot the image or something like that. Could you talk to us a little bit more about how this is practically being used to sort of like, what's the way of stopping people from copying the stuff, and what's the power behind it?
So it is very much, I think you can totally copy an image of an NFT. That's completely, something that you can do. And I think that's a legitimate argument against NFTs. However, it is very much it's a social construct, NFTs. Like just how, because, money is not necessarily based on anything, US dollar. It's all because we all agree that it is worth something. And then that is our mode of financial medium, right? And so it is something that you have to agree with. And if you don't agree with it, you can just ignore it. But that is not necessary. It doesn't necessarily remove the purpose of an NFT and the value it has in its community, in which it is respected.
Cool. Yeah, it's so interesting how these sort of technologies are all based on faith. And I mean, that's crypto sort of to a degree as a whole, is like, you know, when you try to explain it to someone, it's like, well, it's really at the end of the day just sort of, you know, bits on a circuit board, but it's the organization and what they mean to the community that follows it is important. You know, it's the power that we give it, but you know,
Yeah.
we look at Bitcoin and it's $60,000 right now, and sort of that, you know, that's a lot of power behind it, and that's a lot of faith.
Yeah,
Exactly,
it's
like
a lot of faith.
yeah, that's no, that's the big thing.
As with crypto, isn't the authenticity of the product, be it the cryptocurrency or the NFT, backed by the blockchain itself? So the transaction history is essentially being recorded, and that's what's consuming massive amounts of computing power, is keeping these transaction histories recorded but decentralized. Whereas in a bank, this would be in a ledger, and the bank standing backs that up. So it's like a different paradigm, and yeah, it's essentially agreed upon by faith, but this is being backed up by a verifiable technology, where if there was a fake, that can be contested, and you can verify it through the data and the transaction history.
Yeah, it's very easy to, you know, create there's a very solid paper trail. And then about the, you know, the massive amounts of power that's being generated, like there's as we talked about different blockchains, right? Different like ways of like the infrastructure in which the NFTs are held. They're an emerging stuff. So I think there's been a lot of talk about, especially like Ethereum. All of that is generating massive amounts of carbon, like a massive carbon footprint. Like I think it was equivalent to like Belgium in carbon output. Over the past few months. It's been insane. And so there's been a lot of new blockchains that are using different forms of being able to record that transactions that produce like negligible carbon footprints. And it's not as popular right now, but it is becoming more accepted than Ethereum as time progresses, because of the, as I said, the major carbon output, and then also the fact that Ethereum costs a lot to for each transaction. Like it costs like thousands of dollars to create an NFT compared to a few cents on other blockchains that aren't as popular. So it's there's going to be a lot of change in that regard, and so hopefully Ethereum will become less and less popular, so that carbon footprint becomes less intense and ridiculous.
Definitely a lot to talk about there, and if anyone has any questions, do bring them up. I want to touch on one thing real quick that Richard's asking. He asked who controls the data of the NFTs, and I think now might be a good point to talk a little bit about what it means to be decentralized. And do you? I don't want to put you on the spot with this. Was that something that you feel comfortable sort of breaking down, kind of talking about this level of trust, and talking about how the technology sort of verifies itself? But I guess the decentralized part is very important to that. If you want to touch on it, yeah, go ahead.
Like, wait, can you repeat that question one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. Sorry, I was going all over that. So Richard's asking who controls the data, the NFTs,
Right.
And as we were sort of discussing that, it's not exactly how it works. It's not,
Yeah,
you know, we think of a typical structure. The bank, they have a server, and that server has, you know, some numbers that have how much money's in your bank account. But that's not exactly how this works.
Yeah, it's very, like I said, it's decentralized. So there's not really anyone, not a single person. It's kind of a collective that controls it, but no one can change it or anything like that. So it is a radically new way of doing things, and it is so far removed from what we are normally used to that it's really hard to put in terms. You know, the technical details of who controls what and all of that.
Yeah, I know from like a high overview point, it's like almost every user is sort of a node in this web. That's sort of kind of like the web together of everything is, you know, creating this decentralized platform. It's not in any one computer or standpoint, but it's very theoretical to think about and get into.
Yeah, and as Brad said, it's like open. I think that's a really nice way of putting it, like an open cloud computing. You know, it's a collective of computing that all kind of comes together and does each and every transaction as like as a collective, as a hive mind almost.
And then just another clarification point. Can you just clarify one more time about the token versus the ownership of the art? And are you paying for art, or are you paying to have ownership over the copyright? Like, can you explain that?
So you don't own the copyright, actually, which I was very confused about when I first heard about it. I was like, wait, so you buy it, but you don't own the copyright, so you really don't own it in any legal sense. And it all comes back to that social, yeah, really, like if you own the Mona Lisa, you don't, like, you didn't draw it, you don't own
You're not the artist, but you
not the
have
artist.
you may have the rights to the object.
You
Yeah.
own the canvas, but you don't own the art itself, and so it is in a similar way the social contract that everyone has to agree to in order for it to hold its value. And so it doesn't hold copyright, but that also means that you don't have to work through all that paperwork. You don't have to work through the legal like insane transactions. So it's just a new way of circumventing that traditional sense of copyright.
Cool. So how could graphic designers or artists or motion designers sort of get into creating NFTs or using their art to make money? Like, what is the process in which someone would be like, I've heard about this cool thing and I want to use it, but I don't know how to start?
So Carter unfortunately couldn't make it. My partner who created this whole he's very much more into the cryptocurrency side than I am. So I'm the person who created the AI art, which we'll get into later, which is a whole other can of worms, my goodness. But so you have to start with marketing, right? Because you have to create that sense of value, that sense of community. And so you can either create a collection yourself and try to market, or try to find someone to help market you. So like, let's say you created 500 of these graphical designs that are each individual, and then you try to sell those. Or you could list it just as a singular piece on I think OpenSea is a really popular one, and see where that goes. You could partner with a pre-existing project and try to contribute, and then be able to take some of that revenue for yourself. There's a lot of different possibilities, but it's difficult to get into at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty fun.
Cool. Awesome. So do we think we're ready to take a look at those sentences that we started with in the beginning, or do we
Well,
need some
that's
time
gonna
on
be
that?
last.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
gonna be at the
that
end?
was my
Oh,
thought
okay.
process, because I can get like 5 or so.
Okay, gotcha.
have some
I'm just trying to
fun
think
examples.
of
I
some
think,
way that we can show what the actual like art looks like. What were you gonna say, Shayna?
yeah, I think, Ria, do you want to talk about when you started to get into this and how long you guys spent in your 2 weeks, first month of getting up and running?
So I've done AI since, I started in the pandemic during chemistry class because I was extremely bored because of the pandemic. So I got into the AI art in that time, but although I didn't really start the cryptocurrency stuff until mid-September of this year with Carter. And so we from the day we brainstormed the idea to our first launch, which was about 2 weeks. It was very hectic. We sold out in 3 minutes, which was pretty insane. And so we've been rolling on from there and trying to see how long we can take this, because it's a pretty stressful stressful thing, especially on top of school and all that. And so,
Can
yeah.
you also add in there about, is it like, I know we've talked about this, but is it like eBay that you give them a price and then they have to kind of bid each other out for it, or how does that all work?
So it starts with a set price. So like it can be like one. So we use Solana, which is a blockchain, a cryptocurrency. And so so let's say it's one Solana. So so a person, so you have like 300 pieces, each of them one Solana. And then that is a certain set price in US dollars, right? Or not set price, I suppose it's just a price. And then after that, that owner who mints it first, who buys it first, can sell it for more and try to flip it, or they can hold it and see how the value holds. So it's very much like Pokemon cards. You know, you buy it off the shelf for a set price. You hope it's something valuable, and then you can perhaps sell it on a secondary market for more money than you bought it for.
Cool. And what sort of marketplaces are these on? Like, is this just something that, you know, anyone can log into and start, or, you know, buying and selling, or is it something more exclusive than that?
No, it's very simple. You only have to create a wallet, like your own personal. It's like a bank. It's like a decentralized bank account, pretty much. And so you don't need your name. You don't need your address, any kind of personal information. You just create a wallet. You can import cryptocurrency into your wallet and buy stuff and sell stuff on secondary markets. There's several secondary markets for each cryptocurrency, some of them more popular than others. And that's like the medium in which people sell their NFTs to try to create more money, to try to get more money.
And so do you take care of the more of the AI side of this whole operation you have going on, or is that Connor?
So I do more of the AI stuff. He's
Awesome.
more of the infrastructure cryptocurrency person.
And maybe we could talk a little bit about like what sort of technologies are you using in terms of all of the artificial intelligence stuff that's going on? I know it's changing like all the time right now.
Yeah, it's pretty fast paced. It's already like changed 3 generations since I started, actually.
Yeah.
It's pretty insane. So I use a technology called StyleGAN, which is like where you can feed in thousands and thousands and thousands of images that you've curated yourself, and then it will create and then it will train on those images and create a model from which you can generate images and videos, animations, and all of this other stuff, which is a very simplistic view of it because there's a lot of technical like discriminator models and all that, but that's like, it's very much in the weeds of things.
Yeah. And what sort of languages, just out of curiosity, do you use for something like that? Is it mostly like C or something, or?
Pretty much because NVIDIA and Google are very much so the top players in the AI scene. It's all Python, all of it.
Oh yeah.
Like, I have not seen a single thing outside of Python.
Oh really?
So I've been having to learn that whether I like to or not.
Yeah.
It is something you absolutely need. I've not seen because all of the base infrastructure that pretty much all AI tools use is made out of Python, which is
Really?
supplied by Google and NVIDIA. And so because of that, everything is that one language. So it's very universal, which is actually helpful at times, but it's also a little bit tedious other times.
Yeah, I mean, Python's a great one to learn right now. It's very up and coming. I would just think that like performance-wise, but I guess in terms of what you're doing, you know, having a higher level language like that is pretty important.
Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah, it gets pretty gnarly with the code, but you know, we're trying to simplify it as much as possible.
So Jacob had a question. He said, do you have to be in some collection to get sold and noticed, or is it like YouTube or social media where things with the most views rise to the top. So I guess he's sort of saying like the culture of people who are creating these and stuff. Like, how does that work?
So you kind of have to get noticed in order to sell, because there's not like one place where you, like YouTube, where the algorithm tries to decide which thing is best for the user, because it's all decentralized, right? So there's not like one force trying to guide each person to the right into the right side of the NFTs, right? So you have to create your own marketing, you have to build a community yourself, and then you can kind of get into the algorithm sort of like Google and Twitter for your marketing, you have to build up a pretty decently sized community to begin with before you get into like the ball rolling, pretty much.
And then you become part of a collection or something like that?
Well, you create your own collection, so each collection is separate. There's not like
Okay.
it's not all one giant collection or anything like that. So it's like
yeah, what would that be? Like, what is a collection, I guess?
a collection is like your own art or images,
Okay.
or the like. So it's
your
like an art
actual
gallery,
collection.
but just digital, right? It's just your stuff, or maybe it's a collaboration between a few people, and then people can see that and buy your stuff.
And that's hosted on like these stores that we were talking about before. Or is that something that you have to kind of display on your own?
You have to display on your own, because the places I was talking about are secondary markets. So someone has to buy it first before it can be listed on a secondary market. So it's like you have to, it's very much like you're kind of on your own for a while before anyone helps you out, which can be tricky.
And I guess on that, like, how do you think that you found success in like navigating all of this? It sounds like you did pretty well at first.
Yeah, we did really well. So what we did for our first launch was we helped people who were scammed by other NFT collections. And we would give them a free NFT. You just had to just join our Discord server and use this Google form link to confirm that you were actually scammed. And so a lot of people really enjoyed that. It was a very novel concept to a lot of people. And a lot of people stayed after and bought their stuff using their own cryptocurrency, as thanks. So that was definitely helped things the first time. And then after that, there's a bit more community interaction and all that. You want to.
So that's interesting. So how can people get scammed by like, the NFTs, I guess? I didn't even realize that was a possibility.
It's definitely a possibility. It's so like you can create, it's like buying a house online almost, right? Stupid concept, right? So like you can see a bunch of these images of these beautiful houses, but the moment you step inside it might be completely different. So people can promote it as this really cool, all these super fancy images. Oh, it's going to be awesome. And then when you actually like buy it, the image that's given to you is just like an emoji, like something like completely different from what you were advertised for. And then they just leave with the money. And
is there any way that you can like avoid that, or is it?
You can be smart about it,
I guess, like we said.
Yeah. You have to be trust is smart, and then there's like other ways, like you can kind of figure out if you look hard enough if it's a scam. If you interrogate enough, there's a few different practices that one wants to do in order to make sure not to be scammed. But it's going to happen to everyone at some point. If you invest enough.
Didn't you say Carter makes contracts? I don't know what's in those contracts. If it's a contract for the art authenticity, or I don't know.
So a contract is not necessarily shared before the sale. So if it's a legitimate sale, that contract will show, all the details about the art. It's like the description of the art, a contract. And so, if it's a scam, that description could just be insulting you. It could just say nothing. You don't know beforehand. So it's kind of useless if it's a scam. There's not much you can do afterwards because it's decentralized, right? So you can't like go to the police and be like, hey, someone scammed me out of this NFT. It's not really, it doesn't work like that, unfortunately.
And there's not really much laws in terms of this, I wouldn't think of, there's not much buyer protection, I guess, with crypto in general, it's
Yeah,
kind of something that's like,
decentralized, right?
Yeah, no
Yeah.
SEC, no FDIC. It's like
Yeah,
Wild,
it's
Wild West.
exactly.
Yeah, good
Wild
luck.
West. Just, if you get robbed, you get robbed. There's not really anyone that could help you, even if they wanted to. So
Brett says that with like a glimmer in his eye, like, oh, no
No,
regulation.
conventional in my investments. No.
yeah. It's pretty. It's unfortunate, but decentralized. That's just kind of what happens if you leave a bunch, millions of people to try to make money. People are going to try to create schemes and not work as little as possible to get the most profit out of it. So.
And that's one of the other appealing things about it for content creators is that, one of the big problems that we have right now, with streaming at least, is that a lot of that stuff is region locked because like we were talking about before, everything's stuck in these old structures that are, bound by like, geographic borders and stuff like that. But this stuff's just all on the internet, man. Like it's not, you're not stuck down by saying, oh, I can't watch Avatar because I'm in Germany or something and they don't have the rights to it here. It's kind of bringing us, to a little bit back to more of like what you were saying before, how the internet used to be, or it was a little bit more the Wild West and
Yeah, right.
before everyone got their hands on it.
It's the new frontier, and obviously, all things will become regulated over time. So you're gonna enjoy it how it is right now. Like YouTube is a lot more commercialized than it used to be in 2008 or whatever, right? And so like I think there's going to be a lot more possibilities with NFTs, like for instance, like selling concert tickets could be used as just an NFT. So you show your concert ticket NFT. So there's a lot more possibilities than just selling your art as a digital creator, or selling profile pictures or whatever. And so I think that's not being recognized enough and mainstream, because like someone who made $10 million off of these images is like a lot more appealing than talking about future utilizations of the technology.
There's something glamorous for the headlines, and then there's what is
Absolutely.
actually, and what do you see as being sort of the future of these? Do you have any ideas as to where this technology should go, or how we should develop it, or what we should be using it for, just as someone who's kind of all boots on the ground with it? Like, do you have any ideas of the future?
So it can be used as like certification, right, throughout the internet. So you can show that you it doesn't have to be necessarily art, but it could be, let's say, this is kind of out there, but like a college degree. You could have an NFT of your college degree and show, hey, I'm the original owner of this, it's mine. And you could show that for online applications. That's just that's out there, just kind of off the top of my head. That's an application that could be used in the future. So it's a completely, it's a way to confirm that you are in fact the owner of this digital asset. And obviously digital world, so many possibilities. I don't think one could count all of the different ways that this could be used in the future.
How do you think in the future we can regulate it though to an extent that it doesn't become this kind of unregulated economy where there's how can we avoid it if it's in this blockchain situation, disconnected from the government, not becoming some kind of anarcho capitalist society where it's people are taken advantage of, and it's there's this kind of the wealthy have a huge kind of advantage over people without and stuff like that.
Yeah, I hope that doesn't happen. I think there is going to be regulation in time. The government's pretty slow in enforcing regulation. Cryptocurrency has become much more regulated in the past years than it was ever before. And I think NFTs are just so new. I think even people who are at the top of their game in understanding NFTs are not completely sure about everything, and so it's going to take some time but there's going to be regulation around it to make sure that there's not going to be a bunch of tax evasion. There's not going to be much in the way of like, I mean, there's still going to be scams. There's going to be scams, and there's scams all the time, everywhere, however much regulation you put on it. And so it's going to happen over time, but you know, like you should try to read the taxes on what NFT, like what your taxes should be on profits from NFTs. It's a nightmare. Like it's really messy. So it's hopefully will be streamlined by the government soon.
Yeah, or just banned. I mean, China banning crypto. You know, that's an option too.
Absolutely.
One use of NFTs I've heard of that's pretty interesting is digital real estate and digital asset verification. So like in a community-based game, if you have a specific item or asset that can be verified through NFTs for unique property. And as if the metaverse actually becomes some sort of paradigm, then that seems like that could be valuable. I mean, having this is my property, it's verified, you can't duplicate it. It looks like what Valve banned it, but Epic is embracing it. So Valve
in
banned
terms of using it on their store.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Steam was like absolutely, absolutely not. I think that is definitely an interesting possibility. Although I do worry about like microtransactions are already so bad in video games. Like I don't want to know what Ubisoft would do with NFTs, but I fear that day.
It'll be gross. Yeah.
They're gonna turn it they're gonna turn it into real money, you know.
I don't know how that's gonna work, but like, so I think I don't know how that possibility is gonna. I don't think anyone really knows the future of how much NFTs will be utilized, especially, you know, things are moving so fast nowadays. There could be a completely new technology in 3 months and we'll be like, oh, NFTs. Well, I mean, those are kind of redundant now. So who knows?
It's very possible.
Yeah,
right. I like that it opens the door for wanting to kind of standardize things a little bit more. I thought one of the really interesting things that they were talking about on, you know, so their blurb on the website was that, you know, if you have like an NFT as a concert ticket, you can really easily trade it for Ethereum because they can, you know, sort of equate to each other. And I think that's really important that a lot of people don't realize is that like there's like so many standards on the internet for like kind of like categorizing, verifying things. And it's all everyone's internal systems, and it's all very messy. And looking towards sort of a way in the future in which everything's sort of like on a tighter, everyone's on the same standards, and everyone's sort of working on the same, you know, stuff would just make things a lot cleaner.
Yeah, like a lot more streamlined. I think
maybe
that's
even,
definitely.
Yeah. Maybe even waste less power because we were talking about how much energy they used before, but think about how nonsensical some stuff on the internet is. And that, you know, that's running electricity somewhere, and you know, maybe that's using a lot of power that we're not thinking about.
Yeah, like Bitcoin and Ethereum especially are really power hungry, and they weren't built for the use that they're being used for now. It was not built sustainably in mind, and so it's being really harmful to the environment. And so, you know, hopefully there'll be a different standard than Ethereum, because that would not be good. And so I hope there's going to be standardization, but it's also because it's decentralized. People create their own stuff. So maybe at some point there will be some kind of general adoption, but there's always going to be these fringes because of the fact that so easily there's no gatekeeping, right? Which can be good, but then it also means that everyone can just create their own crappy currency and try to make a cheap buck off of it, and you know, just do all this really unsustainable things. So again, like it's such a no one really knows where it's going to be leading to, and I think anyone who says that they do are lying to themselves, certainly.
Awesome. All right. Does anyone have anything else they were curious about? Anything else they want to ask Rio? Do you have any final thoughts you want to start to get out there? We can take them now. One thing that we kind of wanted to touch on while everyone's formulating, they have any questions on is how can people start to get started? If they take today and oh, hold on. Let's see, we have a question right here. Okay, so Ryan's asking if this can relate to motion graphics. So sort of, we've heard that it can work with images. Can it work with video and motion?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I think people have sold like 3D models even, like 3D assets before. So there's a lot of, pretty much any kind of digital format will translate to an NFT. So it's not specifically for images. It's a technology that comes along with the image to certify that you're the owner of that image, if that makes any sense. So it's used for pretty much anything.
Yeah, so it can really be anything with some code in it.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess what would be some first steps that people can take? If they've been tuning in today and they're like, this is something cool, I want to get into it. What's kind of like, where should they start looking and start, learning more?
I would start researching the place you want to sell, like what is your market? B, like, and what are those similar projects that have done well? And see if you can maybe, like, especially for your first project, see if you can partner with someone who's already well acquainted in that field, that is, not a complete jerk, which is a little hard to come by, but it's manageable. And try to come up from there, because it's really difficult. I would not be able to have done it without Carter knowing already generally the good practices of creating an NFT thing. So it's good to have someone to help you along, and then maybe in the future you can do your own thing and do everything yourself. But that's tough to begin with. So and obviously research about the technology and the general consumers that buy NFTs in the first place.
But would you say it's a steep learning curve? Because it took you, what, about 150 hours?
Oh yeah. It was, like AI stuff, it was probably, it was not exactly the same. I think the AI stuff I took like a year to do that. I learned the NFT stuff in like 2 weeks. It is a nightmare because again, it's decentralized, right? So there's not like one way to do things. So there's a bunch of contradictory tutorials of different fragments of how to do these specific things. And so you kind of have to compile them together and learn how to, make it all work in a really rickety way. And so it's a steep learning curve. So again, if you can get a partner who already kind of knows what they're doing and done it before, that makes your life a lot easier.
Yeah, it can be so difficult with internet technologies because there's a ton of people doing it a ton of different ways using their own stuff, and it can become really difficult to sift through all the noise. But like you said, I think that's great. Finding someone who knows how to do this stuff is probably your best bet. Would you say YouTube is like a good resource, or is there anywhere else that you go for like specifically like researching?
It's a good question. I think obviously, like, the BBC, AP, all that kind of stuff is good for like general news about NFT stuff. I think like Medium, which is like a place where anyone can write articles. I feel like that's a different perspective from a more like someone who's actively in the community. So like more of an insider perspective. As for like learning how to do the technical details of it, YouTube obviously is a really good space for it.
There's just forums in general.
Yeah, there's forums like over or no, is that
Stack Overflow.
Stack over. I don't know why I said overstack. Stack Overflow. I don't know why. I listen to that all the time. Yeah. I seem to block it from my mind. So yeah, like all of those different places. Generally, if you've ever done a coding project, very similar sources. They align. The core demographic aligns pretty neatly between coding people and NFT people.
yeah, I'm sure if you came, like you said, you came into with understanding some AI theory and understanding that, and I feel like, you know, there's a lot of foundational stuff that kind of
Absolutely.
just understanding how to work with and learn about technology can help you work with and learn your next technology.
I think it definitely made my life a little bit easier, knowing like just some things coming in. So if you already know some programming, that helps things. But then there's like weird programming language. Like I've never heard of Rust before as a
Yeah,
programming
I've
language.
heard of it.
And then
Haven't used
apparently
it.
that's a big thing in the NFT stuff is like the Rust programming language. I'm like, oh my God, do I have to learn another programming language?
Yeah,
But no,
because it's probably like super
um,
specifically well done for like one thing that helps
exactly.
with that.
So
But
you
yeah,
kind of have to learn, you have to learn very specific things. And so it's a real pain.
cool.
So yeah, like I've done like some Medium articles. Like I've written some stuff on how to do like artificial intelligence, and I'm writing some stuff for NFT things. But like it's still a real hassle to get it all working.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. You know, it's always kind of patching things together and making them work. But cool.
Yeah,
It
Yeah,
looks
I
like we
just
don't have
want
any
to.
more.
Well, I just wanted
Go
to
ahead.
let folks know, if you're a little intimidated, a number of the fine artists I follow that are, you know, spray paint, oil paint, like not coding people in the slightest, and some other friends who are also artists getting involved in NFT and making money at it. So you don't need to be like a technical whiz. It just helps to find somebody who's already knowledgeable of cryptocurrency and how those exchanges work to get started.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know, it's you're going to have to come in with the understanding that you're going to have. It's not like easy money necessarily. You have to really you have to be willing to put some time and you know grunt work into it all.
I think you have a good community that you're building, because can you, before we go look at what you've created for us from our stuff, can you talk about the Discord community and how they are influencing your art?
Yeah, sure. So we do a lot of direct democracy in our Discord. We try to have as much community involvement. I find that, you know, if people feel like they can affect what is happening, it makes them a lot more engaged, and, you know, it helps with business, obviously. And so we do a lot of that kind of stuff, and we're trying to have a more like, you know, less on the flip, make a quick buck kind of mentality. We're trying to move more into like the sustainability, you know, appreciating the art, talking about, you know, art and genres and all of that. Like our whole shtick is called, we call ourselves temporal. And so our thing is like different genres of art through time using artificial intelligence. And so we create these different genres, and then people can vote on which genres they want. And so it's a very interactive, we're trying to make it fun, and very like very approachable and not too like heavy with like the like very much the tech bro sense, which a lot of projects do really hold. So we're trying to make it a lot more of a chill, laid back kind of community.
Awesome. Yeah, so do we want to take a look at these art pieces now?
Absolutely.
Are they cooked up for us?
I got a few going here. I got
Okay.
I got two. They take a while to train, unfortunately, but I try to do my best. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a few of the pieces that I've generated personally that have taken a lot longer, using these thousands of images and this different technology. That's a lot more of a pain to set up, but I find it to have produce a lot more interesting and diverse content. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see here. Okay, this should work out. Okay.
Yep. Looks like you're
so these are some of the pieces from my surrealism. So there's a lot of Basinski, if you've ever heard of him. He's called the Nightmare Artist. Fun title to be called. And so there's a lot of really interesting stuff. Let's see, well, this will not turn around. So like there's different pieces here that are like, I don't know, it's very, it's abstract in a sense, but it creates these very interesting textures, and you can see a lot of intermixing between different types of different types of painting, because a lot of it's like physical turned digital. So you can see like canvas strokes and all of that, especially something like this. So this is like from a horde collection that I created. So it's like a skull. And so if you scroll in, you can kind of see like different textures for the flames, which seem to be digital, but then these like really weird textured teeth. These are like some faces that I've generated. So this one actually, I made a canvas print in the back here of it, and some like really interesting faces. So even some like old impressionism cityscape, like you can definitely absolutely see, the texture of the paint and all of that. As for the pieces that I've generated, one of the pieces that were called was Unicorn Hell. And so this was the output after about 10 minutes of training. So you can kind of see where he was trying to go for, fire, yeah, fire, clouds, dust, unicorns flying about in red flame, which is pretty fun. And then this one was, you tried to destroy me, but you only made me stronger. And so it created it almost looks like Lego, and like this burning building, at least in my opinion. So that's kind of the art that you can generate. Another really interesting one I find is thispersondoesnotexist.org. It's a pretty popular website. So
Oh, that one.
I love that one.
Yeah. So that's
Scares
using
me.
the same technology as the things that I'm using. So it's incredibly diverse in what it can produce, depending on what you want, which I find really fun.
Have you used Night Cafe?
I don't believe I have. No.
It's a pretty accessible AI art generation app. You can app or online interface Night Cafe. Just Google it, you'll find it.
Yeah, that's it.
And then maybe just to bring a little bit back. So you were mostly feeding these, sort of sample sets or keywords, right, to generate these. You weren't going in and creating any of this stuff by hand. Just to sort of remind people, is that like all of this stuff was created from a computer's mind almost, not really any of ours.
The idea being that I want to be as far removed from the art process as possible. Like the only thing I do is give the images, I let it train, and then I stop it. And then once I have that, I have the model, which I can generate millions of unique pieces of art from. And then I generate X amount of images, and I use that as a collection. I pick out my favorites, and that's the final output. And so like I try to keep it because I find it a lot more interesting, because if someone were just like told the AI what to create and like was super heavy-handed in the process, it kind of removes the magic from it, in my opinion. And so all this kind of stuff was generated just completely from generate this seed, and then I didn't know what I would created this. I was like, oh, that's cool, and then used it as part of our collection. And then also one more thing I wanted to talk about quickly was that kind of goes back into the NFT thing, into copying, and if people don't respect what the NFT itself, then people can just steal it. So this person said from TikTok, my sister sent it to me a few days ago, actually. So this person has like 2 million TikTok followers, and they're like drawings from an mental insane asylum, part 4. And then when you look at that, that's one of my pieces of art. 3 out of the 4 pieces were mine. I don't know where they found them from, but clearly they just copy and pasted, right? And I just said that they were from an insane asylum. And this piece, this post got 1.5 million likes.
Wow.
And so like it was really interesting seeing, this might be an NFT, but it can still be taken out of that realm and used as a form of popularity. And I'm sure, this probably made him a little bit of money
And
from
that
just
people
the
thought
amount
it
of
was
interaction. Yeah, exactly.
drawn by
Like
person.
there was 15, you can see 15,000 comments being like, whoa, that's insane. People must be like seeing these weird things, which is actually like, it was pretty weird. It was pretty sad because a lot of people were just delegitimizing people with schizophrenia,
Yeah.
using my stuff created by an AI, which I found, very interesting intersection between ways of generating or creating art. So like, it is a weird experience in the internet realm where there's a lot of conflicting things happening, and you kind of have to choose a side in a lot of ways, even if you don't necessarily want to.
So what are you gonna do about it?
I can't really do anything about it. I mean, I could claim copyright, I guess, but then because I do own the image, but then it's like 7 days old. So, and TikTok is not infamous for like being super pro copyright, all of that. It's not known for that at all. So I kind of just have to, laugh at it a little bit, be like, well, that's pretty funny, and then move on. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Does anyone have any final questions? Any final thoughts? I mean, that was a lot of information for everyone to
I just want to
process.
thank both you, Ethan and Rio. It was great. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
good
would
job.
like to also thank Mike Villani, who couldn't be here. Who
yeah.
helped
He made all
prep
the
this
notes.
whole thing.
He made a lot of the
Yeah.
notes. So
Yeah.
He did a good amount of pretty much all the research I went off of. So everyone thank. But cool.
Yeah.
Any advice on getting into machine learning? Like, would your advice just be learn Python?
Learn Python, and then there's a lot of there's a lot of good GitHub repositories that are like a good intro, like very basic. If you don't have a super powerful computer, you can use Google Colab, which is like a free like computing service that Google offers that gives you pretty decent stuff, and you pay $10 a month, which is not a lot in the grand scheme of things. You get like a pretty decent online computing thing that you can use for AI for bigger projects, which I used for a while. And there's also a really good channel, I'll link it in the chat, called it's 2-minute papers. So he goes over these really cool new developments in the AI community, and always links the GitHub repository. And generally, they're pretty easy to set up, so you can play around, and then from there you can expand into more complicated fields. Like, for instance, I'm trying to clone my voice right now, and then use that, and then create a text synthesizer of how I speak, and then add a deep fake, and then I want to combine it all together and create an AI version of myself, and then interview myself as like I don't know. I feel like that's just like a fun project, way more complicated than the AI art stuff, but I jumped off from the AI art. So it's like, it's
a
really,
huge field. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a massive field. It's a pretty steep learning curve, but like you can have a lot of fun with it. And I'd recommend not getting it too much.
You can get a fair amount of open source stuff online too, though. I know there's OpenCV, which is Open Computer Vision, which just kind of has some basic computer vision models that you can kind of plug and play with. Like, doing sort of that basic interfacing stuff can be easy enough if you know some programming.
Yeah, I have made a point
Yeah.
to never buy an AI technology. If I have to buy it, I'm gonna have to code it myself, because I believe in the open source, all of that stuff. So there's so much stuff on GitHub, and just don't get into, don't feel the need, because at first I felt the need to understand all the technical processes of how the AI is created. It is not necessarily, I feel like I really could have done well without it for a little while, because a lot of it's like linear algebra and calculus, and like 10 20 page long super technical papers. And that'll really drown you in information. And so, just like have fun with it. And then as you get more confident with doing it, then you can understand how it's done and, have a deeper understanding. And then that'll make your work better and more meaningful.
Do you use a particular what is it called? I forget what they're called, like model interface. There's one that starts with like a T or something.
I mean, there's not necessarily an interface specifically for any specific, technology or GitHub or AI. Like I use Anaconda as my prompt. You can create like for your own virtual machine, like your own virtual environments. I mean, so that you can like isolate the libraries, because you're going to be installing a lot of libraries and those can contradict and, crash all your stuff. So definitely create your own environments for each project that you do. And then like I use TensorBoard to
that's what I
visualize like the losses and how my AI is doing over time. And that's pretty helpful. So there's a few different ways to visualize what you've been doing.
Cool. Well, I think we're going to end it here. Rio, thank you very much. And
Of course, it's been a
thanks
pleasure.
for coming in last minute to help. Rio, if you do get this deep fake of yourself done and want to come back, like we would love. Those are things.
Maybe I'll bring my AI on. Just let it do its thing, and I'll just stand in the background to watch it. Yeah, so I think that'll be absolutely. And thank you guys so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Excellent. Thank you everyone who came. I'm going to stop recording.
All right. Bye, everyone.